Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah, brothers. So we're going to carry on with the new course, Grounded, Being Muslim in a Godless World. That's the title some of us weren't here last week. So what we'll do is just summarize quickly what we did last week. I'm going to get you guys to summarize it, inshallah. So who wants to give it a go? What was the main things we discussed last week?
Worldviews.
Worldviews, yeah. That was pretty much the whole discussion, right? Because that was laying down the foundations for the whole course. So what is a worldview?
It's what people, obviously worldview, how someone views the world. It's how someone will interpret the things that happen in the world and the conclusions they'll draw from the things that happen based off of their own experiences and what they've been taught and their intuition. Like it's based on all of these varieties of factors.
Okay. So how would you summarize what you just said? Like, what is a worldview then?
A set of beliefs.
Yeah. So a set of, you can say, fundamental beliefs.
Morals and ethics that you've been brought up with.
Yeah.
So within a certain culture, some things will be looked in a positive way, but in another culture that has a different worldview, those particular aspects of morals and ethics would be considered a bad thing.
Yeah. So there's an ethical dimension to it. So that comes under the taxonomy of a worldview, right? So a worldview, first and foremost, is a set of fundamental beliefs which shape your reality, basically. And when I say that, that means based on those fundamental beliefs or sets of principles that you have, you interpret reality through that, right? So information comes in through that. And we gave the example of a prism, one of the examples we gave. So what does a prism do? Our physicists.
It splits light into the different colors.
Yeah, what's the technical term for it? I think it's refracts. I don't know, I'm asking you guys, I'm not testing you, I don't know. I think it's refracts, right? Yeah. So light comes in, white light comes in, and then it goes through the prism, and then it comes out in all of its different colors, basically, right? So the prism is like the worldview, right? And that therefore determines how that input comes out in a way, how you understand it, how you interpret it, and therefore how you formulate other beliefs, right? So we gave some examples of this as well, right? Let's just think of who could think of a quick example of how someone's worldview may impact the way they understand reality. Think of a science example, because we've got brothers studying science, mashallah. So say there is a phenomenon scientists are studying, and depending on a scientist's worldview, how does he interpret that data? And this happens a lot, right? You'll get these two different scientists look at the same data, but they'll come to two different conclusions, or somewhat different conclusions, based on their worldview or outlook. So can you give me any specific examples?
For example, in quantum mechanics, some may say that it's something inherent to the universe, and some others may say that the theory is not complete.
Okay. So the one that says it's inherent to the universe, what worldview would you say they follow?
I guess that's more scientism, like very.
And the ones that say
dogmatic,
it's not complete.
They would say they have a better understanding of the philosophy of science.
Okay.
Yeah. So it depends on. It's not like one is atheist or one is Muslim. They both can be.
Oh yeah, it could be subtle.
Yeah.
It
could be subtle differences.
Yeah. So even idealists versus materialists, they all probably look at this in a different way as well. The idealists may focus more attention on the consciousness side of it, right? And how that impacts the whole thing. And then the materialists would not want to go down that route and try to explain it via material terms, basically, right? Any other examples? Outside of science?
Can we do like a religious person and a non-religious person?
Yeah.
Okay. So then a religious person's point of view always goes back to God, whatever happens in their life. If they lose a baby, they'll say, this was a test from God. But a non-religious person will have the view that if there is a God, he's a bad God. Do you see? Because he took my baby.
So you're talking about evil and suffering, trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
How they are understood by two different worldviews.
Exactly.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. So then we have the sort of a basic taxonomy of a worldview, which we looked at, which was, we broke it down into three categories. First was ontology, or to do with existence, right? So what exists and the source of existence. The second was epistemology, so the sources of knowledge. So what is the correct way to, or route to knowledge? And then you have morality. Tariq mentioned that, right? Ethics. What is right? What is wrong? Right? So this was the basic breakdown of it. And we discussed this in some length last week, because now that we understand this, that a worldview, we understand the importance of it, how much of an impact it has on one's life and how they function and understand the world. Now we can move on, and this is going to make much more sense as we go along, inshallah. Okay? Today's session, what we're going to touch upon, we're going to finish off on worldviews a little bit, and then we're going to go into the dominant worldview today that governs the West, and by, extension, other parts of the world as well, and how that worldview developed and how it came to be the dominant worldview, right? Because we function within that worldview, right? And last week we loosely defined it, we said, okay, maybe you can say as a secular, liberal, modern worldview, right? It's very hard to fixate it and say, give it one term, but those three sort of words, I think, comprehensively address the overarching, worldview of that people adhere to today, right? So the secular, liberal, modern worldview, right? So, and people assume it to be true. Education is based on it, ethics and morals are based on it, everything, politics is based on it, and it governs our lives, right? And even as Muslims, we function within this worldview. Now that's a very interesting dynamic which we'll take a look at later on, and how much impact that has on your Islam, and how difficult it can make it sometimes as well, which probably we've experienced through our lives. So we'll touch upon that as well. Now I want to give you one more example of where Allah in the Quran gives us an example of how a worldview can shape the way you perceive reality. Someone open up chapter 3, Al-Imran, verse 190, 191. And just recite it if you can, inshallah.
Sorry, was it 190?
190, 191.
Okay. Bismillah. Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alternation of the night and day, there are signs for people of reason.
No, that's not.
No?
91.
That's 190.
190 and 191 is?
It may be a bit like one verse.
They are those who remember Allah while standing, sitting, and lying on their sides, and reflect on the creation of the heavens and the earth, and pray, Our Lord, You have not created all of us without purpose. Glory be to You. Protect us from the torment of the fire.
Okay, so this is a phenomenal case study for us, based on what we've looked at about worldviews. Okay, now in the first verse, in the Arabic, can someone recite the Arabic? Inna fi. They've all said you.
I can be more fluent.
Or is it Imran 19?
Yeah.
Here it is.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب.
Let's stop there for a second, inshallah. So, who speaks, understands Arabic? I know at least one brother.
I can speak it, understand it, but I can't read it.
Okay, inshallah. But the reading's done, so inshallah we'll just go from there. Okay. So what's being said?
So it's basically.
Let's take it word by word.
Word by word. Read the word by word.
Not literally, but like, is there anything that sort of stands out to you?
In the creation, we draw day and night, and
so inna,
indeed,
absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, right? Allah. So there's an emphasis here, right in the beginning of the ayah. Now remember, when Allah speaks to us in the Quran, everything Allah says is factual. Agreed? Right? So when Allah adds an emphasis, What does that mean?
Focus on this verse.
Yeah, so it's like, it's almost rhetorical, right? Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, right, and the alternation of the night and day, there are signs. Okay, so what Allah is referring to is the physical universe that exists, right? The universe that we observe on a daily basis, that we interact with, right? We see night and day, we live by it. We sleep at night, we wake up during the day, and we function during the day, right? And the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of night and day. These are two things Allah is outlining. So, in other words, Allah is getting us to focus on the physical universe. And Allah is telling us that in these things are signs, right? Signs for what? Towards what? What are ayat? Yeah, towards Allah, right? The reality of Allah, that He is the Creator, He is the being worthy of all worship and praise. And then Allah ends the ayah with a specific word that describes these people.
Al-Bab.
Yeah, people of Lub. What is that word in Arabic? What does that mean?
Al-Bab?
Yeah.
People who think or not.
Yeah. Thinking.
Ponder.
Sometimes it's translated as thinking, sometimes
Like
pondering.
rationalism.
People of reason.
Can you say rational?
You can say
Reason.
Not
people
using their mind.
Yeah, not right. Rationalism is probably not the right word. People of the essence, right? People of thought, reflection,
Reasoning.
You can say.
He says, he says
Yeah.
reasoning.
Deep thought, right? You know, in Urdu they have. Do you understand Urdu, bro?
Yeah, but
So they say lubi lubab. You know,
lubi
the
lubab.
essence of something.
yeah.
Get to the essence of something, right? So obviously Urdu taken borrowed from Arabic. So it's referring to the essence of lub. These people are of the essence, right? And then Allah doesn't stop there. So this ayah tells us that there are signs in the universe that point people back to, that are signs of Allah. And they are for people of understanding, reflection, pondering this essence. And then Allah explains who these people are further in the next ayah. So if you're going to recite the next ayah,
Which
3:191.
الذين يذكرون
الذين
الله
يذكرون الله.
Can you just read it out?
before what was this one? الباب.
Yeah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار.
Okay, so who are these people of Lub now? Allah describes them for us.
أصحاب النار.
Yeah, no, in the beginning, first part of the ayah.
الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا.
So they
Those
do
who worship.
yes, they do dhikr,
They remember
constant
Allah.
remembrance of Allah.
Remembrance
Okay,
of Allah.
so remember now, people of Lub are people who remember Allah, are aware of their Creator and remember Him. Okay, and it's not just like a one-off. Okay, yeah, Allah exists. These people are remembering Allah in every state, all the time. Essentially, that's what's being told to us, right? Sitting, standing, lying down. And then the second thing they do is what?
ربنا إنك من تدخل النار فقد
No,
أخذته.
before that.
ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك
No,
فقنا
before
عذاب النار. They use the wisdom.
No, before that even.
ويتفكرون في خلق
Yes.
السماوات.
So they do tafakkur,
تفكر.
right? So and they reflect deeply, right, over what? The creation of the heavens and the earth. So the people of Lub, so assume these people have a worldview, right? These people have a worldview. Now these people that have this worldview are doing two things. They are remembering Allah and they are doing reflection over the universe. And as a result, they come to the true conclusion. One, they see the signs of Allah in the heavens and the earth. And two, what do they say at the end?
It cannot be created for play or
Yes.
joy. It has to be a reason for
They
it.
recognize that the universe, after the reflection, was created with a clear purpose. It's not in play. It's not random. It's not an accident. Very powerful, right? Now we have scientists today, right? Physicists, astronomers, they study the universe. They reflect on the universe. They do tafakkur over the universe, right? They spend their whole lives doing this. They write papers on this. Do they see what the people of Lub see?
No.
In most cases, no. Maybe some, if Allah guides, right? But most of them look at the universe, which Allah is saying is a sign, but they don't come to the same conclusion. Why?
They lack the remembrance of Allah.
Yes, that's missing, right? So this shows us that here's a clear example of a worldview. If your worldview is, say, for example, a materialist worldview, where God doesn't exist in that worldview, there's no notion of the divine, or a creator, you will reflect upon the universe and you won't see any rhyme or reason behind it. You won't see signs behind it and you won't see a purpose behind it. Right? But those that remember Allah and do reflection of the universe, people of this worldview or this outlook, they see what? They see the signs of Allah and they see that it's created with a purpose. So both people are looking at the same thing. These people Allah is mentioning are looking at the signs of Allah, the universe, and the scientists that don't believe in God are also looking at the universe. But they're coming to two different conclusions. Right? It's very powerful, isn't it? A worldview. How you look, what are your fundamental set of beliefs?
It's hard to change.
It's hard to change, but can it change? Can a worldview change?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if it couldn't, then you wouldn't see people becoming Muslim. Right? Because when someone becomes Muslim, there's a shift in worldview.
But the more invested you are in a worldview, it becomes even more difficult to change it.
100%.
Because not your average man can't refute you if you're so invested in it.
Yeah.
Because you know all the answers to all the questions.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So it becomes the more you invest in it's called the psychology of previous investment. The more you're invested in something, the harder it is for you to let go of that position. And you see that in the dawah as well, don't you? You know, you'll be speaking reason and rational arguments and talking to people and giving them reasons to believe, but they won't budge, right?
The other point is that those people who they're not changing their worldview, when you read Quran, you understand that they're arrogant. Because if anybody has an intention to become, let's say, to become humble and accept the truth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide it.
Yes.
Otherwise, if somebody is arrogant, Allah doesn't need him.
Yeah, yeah. So Allah will make it easy for that person. No matter how difficult it is to change one's worldview.
We have many examples of them.
Yeah.
Can we, like...
Yeah, go ahead. Refute each other.
Okay. No, because I was going to say, in order for them to be open to Allah's change, like Allah changing them, they need to first accept that Allah has the power to change them. So initially, that's actually changing their worldview. So in a way, do you get it? Like in the beginning, for them to accept that, they have to change their worldview.
Yeah, I think what he's saying is a level of humility, not necessarily a prior belief. So you can be humble without believing. Say you're an atheist, for example, right? And you're looking still, you're open-minded, right? You're not fixated. Because as soon as you say, I know everything, my worldview is correct, that's an arrogant position, right? So they say they're quite humble, they're like, yeah, okay, maybe I'm wrong, but this is where I stand right now. So they don't believe in God right now, but they're humble enough to look at alternatives, right? So such a person may be a recipient of guidance, possibly, because they're not arrogant. They're looking for the truth still, although they don't believe currently, right? So you can have those situations.
In Quran, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that those people, they reject it, they're arrogant, Allah will push them in their arrogance, or let's say in a position they will go deeper in that.
Yeah, but it's an interesting point about worldviews. People can change in their worldviews. It's not easy always, it's difficult, but it can happen, right? And that's why you even see sometimes, especially if you're not well grounded in your worldview. Obviously from an Islamic perspective, we know Islam is the true worldview, right? It's the most complete worldview, which allows us to make sense of reality as it really is, in its true form. However, this is why we see sometimes younger Muslims or Muslims who are not well grounded in Islam or the Islamic perspective or paradigm or worldview. That's why sometimes they end up in doubts and they sometimes end up even leaving. It's not because they were well grounded and they therefore after their studies realized Islam wasn't true. It's because they weren't well grounded in the first place. And therefore it was very easy to shake them away from it. Right? So it can happen. Right? And this is why this course is specifically designed to help ground people, especially younger people, in the Islamic worldview, so they understand it comprehensively to the degree where they recognize there is no better alternative out there. Right? Okay, so why is secular liberalism or secular liberal modern worldview the dominant worldview today? For this we have to sort of, there was some homework. Who remembers what the homework was? Did anyone get a chance to do some research or looking up?
Yeah, so you said...
I was so busy with the homework.
You said research from existential philosophers.
Oh yes, did I say anything about enlightenment? No? I think it was just existential philosophers, yeah? Okay, we'll get to that in a second. But let's just talk about the enlightenment first, inshallah, yeah? So who's looked up the enlightenment before? Who's heard of it? The enlightenment.
So the early 19th century.
No, before that.
Before that.
Yeah. 17th and 18th.
1745 to
17th, yeah.
Like Immanuel Kant.
MashaAllah, yes. Yeah, loads of philosophers, loads of thinkers, loads of scientists. The Enlightenment, it's very hard to sort of wrap it up in like a concise summary, but it was you can say more of a philosophical type of movement of thinkers, scientists, etc., who wanted to shift gears. Right? Professor Leo Damrosch, he's got a really good course on this, and the way he sort of summarizes it is quite interesting, and I find it's quite powerful from the perspective of the things that we're looking at in this course. He says it was a period where people went from focusing on the vertical plane to focusing on the horizontal plane, right? And I think it's a very powerful summary. Essentially what he's saying is people went from focusing on or having a God-centric worldview to a godless worldview, right? So it was a shift, and it was more of a societal shift of worldviews. So not only on the individual level, but on a societal level. And prior to the Enlightenment, the West was governed by the church, right? Or dominated by the church. Every aspect of life was dominated by the church. And the church, generally speaking, wasn't in favor of the free thinkers, the people the scientists, etc., because a lot of their views were seen as
Losing the dominance.
Yeah, they were seen as heretical. Yeah. So the Enlightenment was the period where that things shifted, right? And there were things that happened prior to the Enlightenment, that led to the Enlightenment, but we don't need to get into the depths of that. Prior to this, in the 16th century, early 17th century, 16th, 17th centuries, you had the scientific revolution, what people refer to, where there was a shift in thinking from, again, or towards rationalism and empiricism. The foundations of that were set there. And then in the Enlightenment, that was further emphasized. Now, there were sort of some key areas in the Enlightenment that thought shifted in. So you have, in regards to belief in God, there were two dominant views that emerged during the Enlightenment. One was deism, and one was atheism, right? Now, wasn't the type of probably the atheism we see in the era of Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, this type of hard naturalistic atheism, but the origins of it were there, right? Deism. Who knows what deism means?
When you believe in God, but He doesn't interfere with the creation. Yeah.
So essentially, what people wanted to do was turn away from, because they wanted to turn away from the church, they essentially were turning away from God as well in the West. Yeah. So man became slowly. They wanted to make man the center of the universe. Man becomes God now. Essentially, man determines what's right and wrong. What are the roots to knowledge, how we understand ethics and morality, how we do politics, all of this stuff. So deism was quite convenient because, it's a convenient way of holding on to God, but at the same time not being governed by God anymore, right? So you believe in God, but you believe in the conception of God, that God created the universe, set the system in motion, and then left it alone, right? Now you determine how to run your lives and the world, right? So it's a very convenient fit. And there were many of the sort of brightest thinkers during the Enlightenment and even after the Enlightenment were deists, right? They believed in a deistic conception of God. I think Einstein was a deist as well. He believed he had a deistic conception of God. There were some atheists as well, but the seeds of atheism were there, right? So you can see there was a shift away from the church, a shift away from God and religion, and a focus upon the material, the physical material world, right? The other shift was in regards to beliefs regarding knowledge. Like we said, this is where rationalism was pushed and empiricism was pushed as, the way forward towards progress, etc. Not all of it was bad, by the way, right? You can see why some of the people were really fed up because of the persecution of the church, etc. So some of it was, you can see why people did it, but, like they say, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? They wanted to move away from Christianity, but some of them completely cut ties with the whole conception of God and religion, right? Then there was the political beliefs, if you like. John Locke, who's heard of John Locke? Yeah. Now he was an eminent thinker, right? And he sort of established some fundamental ideas during the time. He focused on individualism, right? So this is a common sort of thread even today you see amongst liberals. It's about the individual, the self, putting the self above society, as long as you don't harm others in the process of doing what's best for yourself and what you want to do. So you had individualism, you had this concept of natural rights that he pushed, that humans are born with certain natural rights like liberty, etc. Right? And it's funny because when he said natural rights, what he was referring to was that these were given by God, right? Because the concept was, the church basically was, okay, this is revelation from God, therefore no one could question it or change it, right? So he was playing this double game where he was moving away from the church or the people like him, yet wanted to say some things were natural within human beings, and they were therefore were from God. So therefore now the church can't counter what I'm saying. So he's playing the same type of game. And a type of social contract where humans who have natural rights must form governments of their own will to protect those rights. So this is where those concepts came in as well, right? So it was all basically about the human being for the human being, so that the humans could determine what's good, what's right, how we should live, what society should be about, how we should govern society, what people should believe in, what are the right forms of knowledge, or what are the right routes to knowledge, and how we're going to progress in this world, right? So there's this big shift that took place during these centuries, away from religion, away from Christianity, and towards this type of new way of looking at reality, this new worldview, which was this sort of secular, godless, liberal, modern way of life, right? So this is from all of this emerged modernity, basically. Now, from all of this, like I said, during the Enlightenment, you wouldn't find those type of hardline naturalist atheists. They weren't dominant, there. Yeah, you may find natural philosophers, you may find deists, you may find people that believe in God but don't believe in organized religion, right? You'll find all sorts of different people. But they didn't completely reject God or get rid of God. But slowly over the years, this laid the foundations for this to happen, right?
Sorry, can I ask, is David Hume was a pretty hard atheist back in the day?
Yeah. He's a rationalist, as far as I can remember.
With David Hume, his best friend, he was best friends with Adam Smith. And Adam Smith is not an atheist. So you can tell that they were kind of like open to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was all
they
about
were friends
discussion.
with each other and stuff like that.
I mean, under this pretense, you had this whole idea of religious freedom as well. That you can practice whatever religion you like, and you should be allowed to do that, and all of this type of stuff, right? Because remember, they're moving away from that Christian domination in history, right? From around the 7th century onwards, because prior to the Greco-Roman world, they were all about knowledge and learning and advancing things, and that's why around the 7th century you had this shift away from that towards Christianity, and in the Muslim world the opposite. You had the Muslims that were progressing in the sciences and technology and all of this type and mathematics, etc. So they took that work, they preserved it, they learned, they studied it, and they developed upon it over the centuries, while the West was in the Dark Ages, as they refer to, right? And this is why a lot of some academics do mention this, the role that Muslims played, behind the Muslim world played behind the Enlightenment, right? Because they were the ones that preserved the works of the Greeks and the Romans. They translated it, they developed it, right? Many scientists, Ibn al-Haytham and so on and so forth, they made a lot of progress. And a lot of people from the West started to go over to the Islamic world, learned the language, learned the knowledge, brought it back, right? So the foundations, you can say to a great extent, of the modern world are, a lot of thanks is due to the Muslim world and what it did. Right? This is why Iqbal, when he speaks about this, he mentions this. When he speaks about the scientific progress in the West, the reason he upholds it in some ways is because he sees the Islamic roots to it. That it's not just this, non-Islamic invention. It comes from this Muslim world, from the Muslims. But anyway, from that Enlightenment, that shift over the decades and centuries, you have other isms and schisms that have developed that are in line with this whole sort of notion of godlessness and, liberalism and secularism, right? So atheism is obvious, right? You have hedonism. We've spoken about hedonism before as well. How would you define hedonism?
Hey, looking at me. Hedonism, where you live for pleasure, and you just want to enjoy everything you can experience. So it's basically a very vulgar way of thinking.
Yeah, you can say that. Yeah. Crowley was a proponent of hedonism, you can say, right? He was one of those guys. Feminism is another byproduct. What other isms, schisms can you think of?
Naturalism.
Naturalism, yeah.
Secularism.
Secularism is there from the...
You just got a question, like you mentioned John Locke, he mentioned about the natural rights. So at that time there was probably slavery as well, and like other injustice in the societies. So how did he see those?
Yeah, this is why they eventually abolished.
So he was
slavery.
He was like anti-slavery.
I don't know his specific position at the time, but the result of this whole Enlightenment and stuff, yeah, slavery was abolished in the West.
So he started
Eventually.
from there.
Yeah.
Liberalism.
Yeah, liberalism, as we're saying, is the predominant way of... Nihilism is an outcome of it as well, yeah. Absolutely.
The existentialism.
Existentialism also, yes. Yeah. It was very famous in the sort of 19th and early 20th century. Very popular, existentialism. Because of nihilism. Became
Zionism.
Yeah, well, yeah, there you go. Zionism too, yeah. It's not really a religious philosophy, is it?
What about determinism?
It is like it's a secularism type of thing.
What's that?
The Zionism.
Yeah, it's a very secular type of ideology at heart.
Nationalism as well.
Nationalism was nationalism was very big, bro. Absolutely, as a result of the Enlightenment. Yeah.
Imperialism.
Like colonialism, because they kind of felt their superiority.
Yeah.
So it led.
I think it was called the white man's burden.
Yeah. It led to colonialism.
Yeah. I remember I was doing an assignment last year on it for uni, and they were speaking about this. Is that they felt this literal burden upon themselves to go and civilize the uncivilized world, because they felt they were superior, and they had a duty to civilize the other. Yeah, well, I mean, it's hope. We don't know what the intent was or the behind it, but there was a lot of ignorance because there was an assumption that the rest of the world is uncivilized.
It's white saviorism is another word for it.
Yeah.
Like it kind of leads from them feeling superior and feeling that anything they do to like the poorer global south is doing them a favor, and it feeds their own egos more than anything else.
Yeah. A lot of it was ignorance. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Do you know what a curious paradox is? One of the Enlightenment thinkers was Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And he did a study about what is the best way to live. I don't know what it's called, but in the end he found he came up with the concept of the noble savage. He said that's the best example of how to live. And it's basically mountain men who live in the mountains and just have their sheep and have a simple life, and he basically called it the noble savage, and said that's the best form of existence. I think he may have phrased it differently, but he praised that particular way of life.
You will see a variety of different ideas and thoughts amongst some of these thinkers in the Enlightenment, because that was what it was all about. There was no sort of one fix. There was like, yeah, let's get together, let's share ideas, discuss things. But as long as, we break free from the dogma, from organized religion, let man and human beings work things out, and let's figure it out, and let's, progress and move forward. Voltaire was another one. He wrote some really atrocious things about the Prophet, peace be upon him, initially, in his ignorance. But then when he learned about the Prophet, he changed his tune. He actually even developed plays about the Prophet in the Arabs.
Did he die as a Muslim?
I don't know, man. But I know he spoke highly of the Prophet later on in his life, once he learnt about the Prophet, peace be upon him. And obviously there has been this period in our history where there's been this stifling of this understanding that the role the Islamic world, the Muslim world played in that led to the Enlightenment, the West, that happened in the West. But some academics are talking about this. Is a very interesting guy. I don't know if you've seen the clips, people have been sharing them on Twitter, of this academic who's talking about the Arabs. You know,
Roy Casagrande.
yeah, the guy with the long hair.
Yeah, he's a professor from the University of Texas.
Yeah, he's brilliant, man.
Yeah, mashallah,
Yeah.
he's amazing.
Yeah, and he gives phenomenal examples, you know, because you see it and it's all there, you know. So, I mean, and that's something that's very empowering for Muslims as well, right? Because Muslims don't take a longer snapshot of history when it comes to their history. They normally go back only a certain amount, and there's nothing really good in that as far back as they go. When you go really back, yes.
In the latest clip that's going viral, he's actually attributing the gravity to a Muslim. He says that, he mentions that, I forgot, but he's going through all the different inventions. And even the concept of gravity was before in the Arab world, prior to Newton as well. So
yeah, gravity, optics, medicine. There was the canons of medicine that were written, algebra, so many different. And it's interesting. I mean, if we think about it, why were the Muslims doing this? Why do you guys think?
To get closer to Allah.
Yeah, but why?
To understand the reason. You know, when it says in the Quran, those who reason, right? So they wanted to be the part of the group where Allah, you know, where Allah describes them in the Quran. They wanted to say, "This is us."
Yes.
Do you get it?
Yeah. That's definitely probably one of the reasons, because there is encouragement.
Thirst of knowledge.
Thirst of knowledge, yes. But one thing you highlight: Islam never restricted free thinking, or or stopping people from engaging in science and studying the world and getting an education and progressing. Technology, absolutely not. What was brilliant was that Islam gives an ethical dimension to all of these things, because we know, remove ethics from science and what happens. It's a dangerous world, bro, if you think about it. We've seen even in recent history the development of certain technologies and weapons and eugenics, yeah. AI is another big thing these days, and there's a whole ethical question mark, Where do you stop? How far do you go? What realms do we allow AI to function within, and what realms don't we pull back? These are big ethical questions, so ethics has to go hand in hand. And without God, the only ethical framework you have is what? Your subjective opinions of society, right? So Islam allowed for these things. I think that's a powerful thing to recognize. Because a lot of people these days, the Dawkins types would argue, oh, look, religion is backward, Islam is backward, it's against progress and all of this stuff. Is that true? No, it isn't. Absolutely not.
Sometimes what they say is, because I had like family gatherings where I've actually mentioned this point as well, but they come back and say, what are they doing now? Tell us what they've done now.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, how should we answer
But that's not an argument against, it's not an argument against Islam per se. It could be an argument against Muslims and the state of the Muslims, right? But
I was speaking as well to a family member, and I was giving these points that look historically with this, and he says, yeah, but most of these scholars probably mubtadi' anyways. You do tabdi' of them, and they were like heretical views, and that's why they had that thirst of knowledge. That's one family member that I know.
It just takes a simple reading of the Quran to know that's not true. Because the Quran constantly encourages us to observe the world. Even the ayah we reflected upon, chapter 3, verse 190. Essentially, there's an encouragement to study the universe, to do tafakkur, to do deep reflection and pondering. What is that? That's literally what you would call in modern terms science, to study the world around you, So Allah is encouraging us to study the world. Yes, there is a reason behind it, right? There's another ayah in the Quran where Allah says, and I brought you forth from your mother's wombs. I don't remember what ayah is specifically, but Allah says He brought us forth from our mother's wombs, knowing nothing, and then He gave us hearing and sight and minds so that we may be grateful. Right? This is if someone could pull that ayah up, it's such a profound verse of the Quran.
I was going to say, should we entertain this as being like the yardstick of truth? All people say that, Muslims, they made a lot of progress in sort of science and stuff like that. But should you really be entertaining that, as in terms of people who see that science is the ultimate truth these days? So therefore, you should show that Muslims in the past did this. So therefore, we're like some sort of, therefore we have truth or something like that. I think we should move away from that and say, kind of question this whole, idea of progress and modern progress. I don't know if
I don't get the question. Rephrase it. Well,
Saying it might seem like an inferiority complex where we always have to compare. Oh, we had science back in the day.
Yeah.
Why can't we just debate things
why
on first principles?
Like, why does that have to be at least a semi-criteria of truth?
No, I don't think
Why
it's a
can't
criteria
truth
of
have
truth.
to be I think we should, I don't know, maybe we should argue that instead.
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, personally, when I say, look, Muslims led in the science for centuries, literally, we shouldn't use it as something, we did it in the past, or that, look, Muslims did science. It shouldn't be something we should look, we're alive now and the world's ticking and time's going on and the day of judgment hasn't yet come. It's what do we do from this point onwards? That's what matters, right? At the end of the day, right? But I think it's a good thing to look back and reflect from the perspective of deriving inspiration. I think that's very powerful. So I wouldn't use it as an argument, against, someone that says, West is doing, we did something. It doesn't matter. And they're right in one sense. Yeah, what are you doing now? They're right in one sense. What are the Muslims doing now? Where do the Muslims stand in the world today? They're right from one perspective, right? So I think we should look at it as a point of encouragement that they did that, and they did that because Islam allowed for that and encouraged that within a framework. It wasn't that study the universe for the sake of studying the universe and then just enjoy the process. No. There was an ultimate objective. That ayah I was mentioning, that Allah brought us out of our mother's wombs. Yeah, which
Well, I found the one that says, He's the one who brought you into being and gave you hearing, sight and intellect. Yet you still hardly give any gratitude.
Yeah, afida, the word that's used for intellect, I think. Fu'ad is a very powerful word that's used in that ayah because, and it may be an ayah that's mentioned more than once in a different way, but it's very powerful because Allah is telling us He brought us out of our mother's wombs not knowing anything, and then He gave us hearing and sight. What are these? Hearing and sight. Senses, right? And minds, intellects. Why? So that we may be grateful, right? I think it was Bertrand Russell who said, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact quote. He said, "Science is an attempt to discover by means of making observations and then reasoning upon your observations." Said something along those lines. This is exactly what we're hearing here. That Allah is telling us He gave us hearing and sight, our senses, so that we can reflect and then reason upon what we've reflected upon, right? So that we may be grateful. So the objective, the end goal is different, right? From an Islamic perspective, yes, we're encouraged to do science, we're encouraged to engage in studying the world and doing, inventing new technology and all of this stuff. With what end goal in mind? Ultimately, we should be in line with the ultimate purpose, which is to worship Allah, right? So it draws us closer to Allah. It allows us to, know our Creator through studying the universe so that we can worship Him better. It allows us to develop new technologies which can benefit humanity, which is a form of worship, to better the world, which is a form of worship. So it's a very powerful incentive from an Islamic perspective to engage in science and to engage in, all of these different sciences. But from a materialist perspective, think about the motivations from a godless, materialist, naturalist perspective. There is no God, there is no Creator, everything is an accident. It's here by chance. You are an accident. So why go do the science and study, spend your life doing all of this? For what reason?
Do you think it's a good idea to argue that all this progress has been a net negative rather than a net positive?
It really depends on who you ask, innit? So there has been a lot of negative that's come from it. There's been some good positive as well, absolutely, right? There's a lot of positives that come out of science and technology, no doubt, bro. We can't deny that, right? But there's a lot of negatives that come from it.
Can I just mention this article? It's in The Guardian. It's about Stephen Hawking. And one of his research fellows actually said that he was thinking of, he was going to scrap his whole work, The Brief History of Time, which is probably one of the most famous things. And the reason he gave was, this was verbatim, it says, the problem for Hawking was his struggle to understand how the universe could have created conditions so perfectly hospitable to life. And that's that's one of his cosmologist colleagues. And he said, Stephen told me he now thought he had been wrong. And so he and I worked shoulder to shoulder for the next 20 years to develop a new theory of the cosmos, one that could better account for the emergence of life. So these things are troubling them. Even this is their top guy. And even he couldn't grasp the concept of how everything could be so perfect. And
because it didn't fit into his worldview.
Exactly.
You see, that's an example, perfect example of that.
Just to put another point, I saw a clip of Christopher Hitchens, and he was saying the best argument for God was fine-tune and how everything's perfect. And for me, that's one of like the weakest arguments. Yeah. And I think that's actually the difference between worldviews. For them, because they're so scientific and everything scientism has to be observed, and because fine-tuning is observed, that we can observe the golden locks, the human anatomy, everything. That for them, this is a solid argument. Yeah. And for us in the Dawah, I don't know about you brothers, it's probably very down there for me.
I think that shows the power of intuition, like your own, thinking when you're alone. You just think of all these things, and I think that's more convincing than.
Yeah, and honesty as well, bro. Right? I mean, if you're a serious scientist and you see these patterns emerge, right? You see the constants. You see all this fine tuning, I mean, it's about honesty. Like, what are you going to conclude from that? From what Tariq read as well. And Dawkins is a more extreme example. He calls it an illusion of design. So he sees it, he observes it, but he doesn't want to accept it. So he says it's an illusion because it doesn't fit into his paradigm, right? Did you want to say?
I was just going to answer a question that you asked just previously when you were saying how can they, be motivated, let's say, to do any of these scientific advancements from a purely materialistic perspective. Because we, from an Islamic perspective, we have Allah behind us who's going to reward us even after death. Okay? So I really tried to think like an atheist just a few months ago. Really, like I really woke up one day and said, I want to think like an atheist and see if I can actually make meaning of my life. Can I actually have meaning? And honestly, I'll be honest with you guys, I still had meaning in my life.
And what was the meaning in your life?
For example, I wanted to treat my wife with respect.
Okay. So you wanted to treat your wife with respect?
Yeah. I wanted to do better for my family. I wanted to help others. I still had these feelings. Like, do you get it? Like, the atheistic paradigm didn't prevent me from doing that, and it won't prevent me from doing science either.
It didn't prevent you from giving your life meaning. There's a difference.
Yeah. So the meaning for a materialistic person to advance in science is the same way.
So they can give themselves meaning, right? But ultimately there's no meaning.
But we're giving ourselves meaning by believing in Allah. Isn't that the same thing?
No, we begin with Allah. There's a difference.
As well, if we talk about meaning...
so once you come to the conclusion that Allah exists and that Quran is revelation from Allah, then what the Quran says is necessarily true, right?
Yes.
So when Allah tells us He created us with a specific purpose, then that's ultimately true. It's not just true in the sense that, okay, I give myself this meaning I make it up for myself because, I'm just thinking and I just come up with this. It's not that anymore. It's coming from the divine source.
So why do we ask people, where do you get your morality from then? Because surely we get our morality from God because we believe in a God. You're saying, or we are saying, that they don't believe in a God, so they cannot get their morality from anywhere, but they do.
No. So with moralities, the way, here's how I put it. You can be moral, you can intuitively, from a fitri perspective, although that word won't mean any much without a godless Islamic perspective, but from an intuitive perspective, they will understand or feel some things are right, some things are wrong. And they may choose to live that way, according to that. They may not. But it's not grounded objectively.
Okay.
It's just subjective, right? Meaning if someone chooses not to live that way, sorry bro, I'm going to come back to you. If someone chooses not to live that way, then you can't say that person is wrong for not living according to these good standards that I think are good. It's all subjective, right?
But at the end of the day, the materialistic perspective will allow for advancements. Do you see?
What do you mean? We're talking about morals.
No, but yeah, but the thing is, when you asked the question and you said, look, Muslims have Islam to motivate them to do, you know, the scientific experiments and, you know, for the sake of God and stuff. So how does the materialistic person, you know, justify their motivation? How does that work?
No, they can
so
make
that's
up,
where I'm getting the
they can
morality stuff
so
from.
they can make up certain motivations for themselves. Like someone like Dawkins can say, oh, the purpose of my life is just to study the universe, and I find joy in that. Sure, he can find joy in that, right? But that's something he's told himself, and it's probably given him some joy. He's enjoyed it, right? But that's not ultimate meaning. That's just something he's come up with and made up for himself. Ultimately, it's going to mean nothing once he's dead. Ultimately, there's nothing behind it. He lived and he died, right? So whether he chose to be a rapist or a physicist, there's literally no objective difference.
I mean, his worldview may not explain that area.
Yeah.
But it can
on a
explain
small scale,
other stuff.
Yeah, on a small scale, for him to just keep going, I can see what you're saying. They'll give anyone could say, okay, my purpose from this day on is to do charity work, right? So I'm going to start a business and just all the money you make is going to go to charity. That's the purpose of my life. That person can live a good life doing that and enjoy that and feel fulfilled, etc. No doubt. But ultimately, he's just made that up for himself. He's lied to himself, come up with something, and then lived according to it. That's it. Intrinsically, objectively, there's nothing to ground it.
So if you can ground your beliefs, do they then become objective?
Yeah, it depends what you ground it in.
See, isn't that subjective, what you just said?
No, because there's a difference
Depends on what you ground it.
Yeah, because there's a difference between an ultimate authority, God, and a human authority.
But there's multiple people who believe in different kind of like belief systems which include God. How? So their version of that morality, would that then be justified?
No, so in that case, it will be a case of a discussion with that specific person. You know, and let's see, okay, is your worldview, is your religion true? Then that's the question.
So it goes to the roots again?
Yes, it goes to the roots.
Got you,
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So then there'll be that discussion. Yeah. Bro, you
It's just when he talked about meaning
during this class.
And he was
I'm joking.
when he was saying about meaning, I try to live as an atheist. No. He was saying I tried to wake up as an atheist, and I found meaning of family, working hard to build a future for family and wife and all that. But at the end of the day, that meaning you gave you is temporal. It can go away any second.
Yeah.
For example, you have money that can go away. You have a job that you're really satisfied with, that can go away. Your family, they can leave you. Inshallah, that doesn't happen for you, brother. But I'm saying that meaning you gave you is temporal and finite and can go away. But when you have Allah as your meaning, whatever happens to you in this dunya is always there. It's always there in your heart. And that's why when Ibn Taymiyyah, Shaykh al-Islam, when he went to prison, they stripped everything away from him. They whipped him, they hurt him. But what did he say? Jannah fi sadri. Heaven's in my heart. And that's his meaning. The ultimate meaning that's transcendent.
Yeah. So just to sort of clarify, I mean, an atheist can live a meaningful life, right? No doubt, but it depends. How do we define that? In the subjective sense, in the sense that they've given themselves some meaning or made something up for themselves, and it's enough and it's working and it gives them joy and meaning. Yeah, sure, they can do that. They can give meaning to their life, but there is no ultimate meaning to their life.
And if they give meaning, I don't want to long out too much because we could
go
go
on
for
for
hours.
This will clarify,
if they were to give meaning to their life and everything in their life is justified and they're happy with it, what reason?
What do you mean justified?
As in, for them it's justified subjectively.
So they mean they're content with just making up meaning for themselves?
Yeah, they're content with it and they're not arrogant about it either. They're just living a normal life.
Yeah.
What reason do you give them to come to Islam?
Well, I'll just tell them, frankly speaking, you are lying to yourself.
Why are you content?
I know it's harsh, right? But it's the reality. It's like kids play dress up. You know, a kid wants to be a doctor or a policeman, they dress up and they act like a policeman. That's what they're doing. They're lying to themselves. It's role play, bro.
But and sorry for, I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
I believe in what you're saying. Just to make it clear.
Bring him on cover.
Yeah, just to make it clear. So, if I was to continue, I could just say, okay, I believe in a God now, and I'm just still following the same content life that I was following. Now I've just said, okay, I believe in God. So I don't really need a prophet or a Quran or anything to tell me how to live. I'm already like living.
Yeah, but it goes
You know
back
what I
to the sort of notion of a deistic belief in God then, right? So, okay, even, and this is a problem I have with Muslims as well. Many Muslims will say, I believe in God, but they just keep living as if God doesn't exist, right? So you don't have ultimate meaning until you recognize what God has said and then you live according to it, right? Many people do this, unfortunately, bro. They will say they believe in a higher power, full stop, leave it at that, and then, okay, what do I do in my life? What do I want to do? What's the purpose of my life? That's how most people will function. And they will be doing the same thing an atheist will be. They will live an existence no different from an atheist who says there is no God. The existence, nihilism, will be no different for them, right? Their life will be as meaningless as an atheist's life. Because God exists, full stop. That's a problem, right? It's when you say, God exists, and God created me for a reason, a purpose, and He has given me that purpose, and I'm going to live according to that purpose. That's where objective meaning comes in. That's where intrinsic meaning comes in. That's where real meaning comes to your life. That my existence means something, right? For an atheist, they can make up stuff for themselves. They can lie to themselves, and it may work for them, may get them by. You know, like when someone's smoking weed, yeah? It may make them feel good. They may give them a high, may make them hallucinate for a bit, but it's not real. It's just a drug. It's just something they've told themselves. They're just playing along with. Ultimately, their life is ultimately meaningless in the absence of God and religion, or revelation to be more specific. Their life is ultimately meaningless, right? And this is why many Muslims have this. I call them Muslim nihilists. You will see, there's many of them. Many, especially in the worldview that we live in today, right? I've seen this problem with a lot of Muslims because the dominant worldview for them is not Islam. They're Muslim, but the dominant worldview is secular, liberal, modernity.
I feel like I grew up like that.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah.
Yeah. And many people did, right?
I think Islam is not limited to all these things what we mentioned. Islam also answered the question of unseen things. And Islam also, that's a very small part of Islam. And whenever we accept Islam as a religion, we should enter to Islam completely. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Udkhulu fi silmi kaffa." It doesn't mean whatever you choose, you're fine with that, and you can leave other beside. So that's how the Quraysh in Mecca offered the Prophet ﷺ, one day we will practice your religion, tomorrow you can do ours. So the Prophet ﷺ rejected it. We cannot play with Islam. So we accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as our Lord, as our God, and then we follow our khwahishat, our desires. So it doesn't, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reject all these follow of our khwahishat and desires. So because if we follow our desires, that will astray us from the right path.
Yeah, and it makes life meaningless.
Yeah.
You know, it's a beautiful point that Islam is a complete system. You don't pick and choose, right? You accept it as a whole worldview, and therefore, once you do that wholeheartedly and sincerely, it shapes your reality. The way you see the world, the way you engage with people, the way you engage with yourself, with Allah, you know.
Entering to toilet, Islam has instruction how to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
So
From that to very high level.
Sorry, bro. So are you saying that anything that's like these isms, for example, logical positivism, for example, these isms are created by human beings and the criterias are set by them, yeah? Would you then say these are all just made up and just tales that they're telling themselves?
No, so when you refer to worldviews, there are other worldviews that exist. The way I would put it is that there may be some truth within a particular worldview, and there will be things that are incorrect as well, right? So sure, there may be some truth in materialism as a worldview, not as a philosophy, meaning as a way of life, but materialism as a worldview, meaning that, you know, the physical world exists, right? Yes. The physical world is comprised of atoms and molecules, physical stuff, base stuff. Maybe, right? This has been disputed among scientists even now, these days, right? Like, what is that the base? Idealists and materialists are going back and forth all the time, right? So maybe you can say, right? Now, from an Islamic perspective, this is another discussion, You know, how do we understand the physical? How does, from an Islamic perspective, how do we understand the physical world that we live in? What is the nature of this physical world? I haven't looked into it in any depth, bro, so I can't comment on it. But if anyone wants to share anything in regards to that, but the point is, without going off too much, that sure, there may be some truths and there may be some falsehoods.
But it's not the ultimate truth, obviously.
With these worldviews? No. Because a worldview is a composite of various different ideas and beliefs. It's not just one thing.
But if we go to the root of it, the fact that it's man-made makes it what's that word I'm looking for? Like, makes it not the absolute truth, is it?
I mean, what are the chances of a man coming up with a worldview which is 100% identical to the Islamic worldview?
Yeah.
I mean,
and people who are listening to this, if you're not a Muslim, we don't even believe the Prophet ﷺ was the one who made this up. It was from God. It was
direct revelation.
Yeah, so if it's not man-made.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, let's move on. I guess it was a good discussion-based session, but we didn't get through much today. So, from the Enlightenment, we are here today. You know, over the centuries, there's been other isms and schisms that have come about, which have all fundamentally been offshoots of this liberal modern worldview, right? Whether it's atheism, hedonism, materialism, feminism, all these isms and schisms. What they all have, there's some things they all have in common. One thing, what would you say is?
Isms.
Yeah, they're all isms, yeah. What else do they have in common?
Liberalism?
No, even liberalism.
The rejection of God.
Rejection of God, right? There is no God, there is no creator, right? Some may allow for a deistic conception of God, but that's pretty much it. So what they would say is like naturalism, this whole physical system is a closed system, anything beyond it has nothing to do with it, even if there is something beyond it, right? So from this arises the crises, what I call the crises of the West, or the modern West, right? Now there's a lot of good things as we discussed, but these, I've outlined 4 key crises of the modern world, right? The first is the crisis of knowledge. The second is the crisis of meaning. The third is the crisis of identity, and the fourth is the crisis of morality. So we've discussed these to some extent already, but these are the 4 issues that have emerged that people cannot answer these questions. They don't know what the answers are. And especially going towards now postmodernism, some would say we're in postmodernism, or in that era, things are even more confusing. As far as identity, meaning, morality, all of these things are concerned, people don't know who they are. What is the route to knowledge? The postmodernists, many of them, or some of them at least, will reject this whole notion of empiricism and rationalism, you know, because they will define truth as they want to define it. You know, truth is subjective. So we run into these issues now. I think we'll end on the last slide. You know, read out the thing I sent you, bro.
Yes.
So this is basically, I'll give you context. I think to summarize all of this, I think Nietzsche, although there's a lot to disagree with when it comes to him, but some things I think he's made some profound statements, right? There's this one parable in the gay science. It's called the parable of the madman, right? And you know, they say God is dead. Nietzsche said God is dead, and some of the atheists, they're like, yeah, no, God is dead, you know. But they didn't understand what Nietzsche was saying. So he's going to read you the parable, or part of the parable, Tariq, and I want you to really pay attention and tell me what you think he's saying, okay?
The parable of the madman. Where has God gone? He cried. I shall tell you. We have killed him. You and I, we are his murderers. But how have we done this? How were we able to drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What did we do when we unchained the earth from its sun? Whither it is moving now? Whither are we moving now? Away from all the suns. Are we not perpetually falling? Backward, sideward, forward, in all directions. Is there any up or down? Left. Are we not straying as though an infinite nothing? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is it not more and more night coming on all the Is it not more and more night coming on all the time? Must not lanterns be lit in the morning? Here the madman fell silent and again regarded his listeners, and they too were silent and stared at him in astonishment. At last he threw his lantern to the ground, and he broke and went out. I have come too early. He then said, my time has not yet. Sorry. He said then, my time has not come yet.
So what do you guys make of that?
He responded in a way that he rejected the claims of somebody that there is no God. He gave a response that if you say that there is no God, it's impossible to think about it. And if it's impossible to kill the God, or let's say impossible to claim this, because that's nonsense.
That's a good summary, bro, mashallah. Yeah, what else do you guys think?
He's basically saying that it's too early to say that God is dead. Basically, that's what he's saying. Because the man that comes and he says that, God is dead, he then asks him, have you solved these problems yet? Have you thought about all of this yet? Have you reasoned with all of this yet? The answer is no. So you came too early. We still cannot say God is dead. That's what he's saying.
Okay, what else you guys
Say
say?
from the first parts, what I understood at least is that as we have removed God from the picture, that's what God said, is that the why has now been removed, so there's no point of doing the how. There's no reasons to, why should we swipe the sponge of the night, all that stuff. There's no reason for us to do this. That's maybe why the guy left. It's like, there's no reason for this. I'll come back to another day when the reason comes back. It'll become an anchor for me to do all of this.
So it's like nihilism, basically.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Anything else?
I think, like, building on what's been said, it's almost like the people are rejecting God in like one tiny aspect, which is like their ideology in the specific field. But he's bringing up the sea, the horizon. He's almost reminding you that like we could never even be close to like 0.1% of the power that God has. And it's just like reminding us that as humans, like how far off of killing God you could possibly be. And it's almost like minimizing everything and just showing the bigger picture.
Okay.
Can I add one last
Yeah,
thing?
you can.
Because now that I've read it from the phone here, is he saying, are we the people who are controlling the universe? Is he actually asking this? Because he's like, he does say here, what did we do when we unchained the earth from its sun? We didn't do anything. He's basically asking who does the powers belong to actually?
Is he applying that? Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, like he's kind of asking that because it's like, whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving now? Away from the sun? Are we not perpetually falling? Like, who's doing all this?
Yeah.
I'm making it up, but that's what I understand.
I had one more point you can say, maybe this is waffling as well, is that he broke the lantern, and light can be represented as a purpose or a vision that they can look forward to. And as you have killed God, or God's out of the picture, astaghfirullah, is that light has now diminished, and that's why he left.
Yeah, and so he speaks about bringing out lanterns.
Yeah.
We're going to have to bring this. So it's going from light to darkness with the death of God, all right? It's very interesting because essentially what he's highlighting, from my perspective, when I read this, was you've turned away from God, you're going to lose your bearings. Where is the earth going? Left, right? Which direction are you? You're going to lose all your bearings. Without God, you can't have a sense of reality. Who are you? What are you? Where are you going? What is it all about? So these deep existential questions that people have, you're never going to have the answers to those in the absence of God. And it seems like what he's suggesting is that, people have, out of excitement from breaking free from the church and dogma, they have, immaturely broken away from God and think that it's all good now because we're progressing in science and technology. But what they fail to realize and see is that underneath, it's like the apple's rotting from the inside. Ethically, morally, existentially, from the perspective of meaning, all of these things, you can never have answers to these questions anymore, right? And these are the fundamental things that make us human, right? Ethics, morals, who are we, what are we, where are we going? You've lost the answers to these questions by turning away from God. And this is what, when he says, I've come too early, it's almost like these people don't realize it yet. People are not realizing the implications of turning away from God. And people are going to soon realize this. And that's why they're seeing him as this crazy madman, right? Whereas, in fact, he's not the one that's mad. He's the one that's actually sane. Everyone else that he's speaking to is nuts. because they've turned away from God and they haven't realized the implications of that, right? And now, as the years and the decades and centuries have gone by, we're seeing the implications of that. Yes, modernity, technology, science, advancements, all of this stuff. But what makes us human, those fundamental things, those existential questions, there's no answers. We're worse than animals, right?
Then why was Nietzsche an atheist? If he believed,
he was a contradictory figure, this guy, bro. When you read him, right, he was. It's funny because there's a lot of, it seems like contradictions as far as I've read him, right? It seems like he was frustrated, and I think Iqbal understood him quite well. You know, some academics say that Iqbal didn't really study Nietzsche. I've been reading up on Iqbal. Iqbal actually did study Nietzsche quite intensively, and he had a soft spot towards Nietzsche, because what he saw in Nietzsche was a guy who needed a guide, right? Because he recognized the implications of denying God and turning away from God, but he also recognized Christianity and he didn't want anything to do with it, but he didn't have an alternative. But he was such an intellect that he recognized he needed something in his life more than just the material, subjective stuff, but there was nowhere for him to go. And this was his frustration, his agitation, right? This is how Iqbal understood him. Right? And you know, eventually, do you know how Nietzsche died? Does anyone know how Nietzsche died?
He killed himself, didn't he?
I don't know if he killed himself, but he went crazy.
He saw like a horse.
He stroked a horse.
Yeah.
I think he was in Germany somewhere. I can't remember exactly where. And after that, he went mad.
It's a proof of
he stroked
frustration.
Yeah, he lost his mind. You know, and this is the ayah that we recited last week, chapter 59, verse 19. And do not be like those who forgot Allah. So he made them forget themselves. Those are the ones who are the truly rebellious. You know, and where Allah says, those who turn away from the remembrance of Allah have constricted, depressed lives. Right? Not everyone's going to have this, but if you're a brain or an intellect like Nietzsche, then you're in trouble, basically. Yeah? You're in big trouble. And his life is testament to that. Yes, bro.
Oh, me? Okay, sorry. I was going to ask you, you know how we spoke about reason and stuff like that, and has it in the Quran, how Allah will, you know, open the doors of, I don't know if he says this exactly, but in terms of reason, we can agree that Nietzsche done a lot of it, right? He reasoned a lot.
Yeah, he's a philosopher. So
I mean, the fact that he's losing his mind and stuff like that, and he knew that God had to exist, as you said, and he went mad with it. So why didn't Allah guide him?
Allah knows best, bro.
At that time,
Europe
Europe didn't have the best transmission of Islam. It was actually a rather disingenuous. Like they used to insult the Prophet, fake stories about the Prophet ﷺ.
Yeah.
So how many of these Enlightenment thinkers would have actually been Muslims if they had the real Islam?
So remember, if someone hasn't, even our scholars mention, if someone doesn't receive the message of Islam, even if they receive the message but it's like corrupted or distorted, you know, even such people would have a test on the Day of Judgment.
Do you think the fact that he went insane
I was going to say that
is his blessing from Allah?
Maybe it's a mercy. It was a mercy from Allah.
Maybe.
Yeah, because the pen's lifted on an insane mad person, right?
Like, I was watching Long Theology. Said Newton, he was a Unitarian Christian that was insulting the Trinity, saying this is ridiculous. I don't know how people believe in it. So at that time, I'm not sure how Islam was doing in England that he can get the correct
there was definitely
message.
a lot of negativity. Right, because a lot of the translations of the Quran that existed at the time were done by Orientalists who had a motive to misrepresent Islam, right?
Did he not read like Muslim philosophers? Like,
I don't think he read Islam much. I as far as I remember, he probably read some things about Islam, but not much as far as I'm aware. Yeah, but then again, I'm not saying Nietzsche was this brilliant guy that, you know, maybe he had maybe he had loads of issues, right? He wasn't, Allah knows best, right? But at least from Iqbal's perspective, Iqbal even said twice, I think, in his works that if he had spoken to him, if he was in his time, he would have become Muslim. He would have guided him to Islam. Because, you know, Iqbal was quite an eccentric, you know, thinker as well, very a genius mind, who's misunderstood a lot as well these days. But
I don't know.
yeah, he's a good book you should read because you're into philosophy.
Yeah.
Maybe Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam. The reconstruction of religious thought. Very wise man. Yeah, he had some unique views. Let's just say that. But his overall core concepts and ideas, And the way he wanted to focus on Muslims connecting with Allah and developing a relationship with Allah and progressing and changing the world was very profound, very powerful, very powerful.
I like his poem, Kabhi Naujawan Muslim Tadabbur Bhi Kiya Tuni. He's taking Muslim youth back to the era of Islam, the golden age of Islam.
Yes.
And he said, do you know how you were and now how you are?
Yeah.
You came from a Bedouin people and you broke this empires and everything, and now look how you are going away.
Yeah, I think he's misunderstood a lot. A lot of Muslims just ignore him or reject him, because the problem is, if you look at recent studies on Iqbal, it's predominantly the secular Muslims that are studying Iqbal, and therefore when they interpret him, because poetry, you know, bro, can be interpreted in many ways, right? So they interpret him in a very secular way, which leads to a lot of misunderstanding as well. But yeah, he had some profound insights. He was a genius, bro. I think he did some phenomenal work, mashallah. May Allah forgive him and enter into Jannah, inshallah. Anything else, brothers, before we wrap up for today? Okay, khalas. So I guess next week we'll start on these different crises and just have a sort of run through of all of them, and then the next section will be going into understanding Islam as a comprehensive worldview and seeing how it's an antidote to all of these issues, these crises that we outline, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, brothers. May Allah bless you, and we'll speak next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.